Hey, Soraya.
Hey, Jeff.
So on today's podcast, we don't have a Skype intro, and that's because we're not on Skype today.
And we're actually in the same room.
This is a first for
Who'd have
us.
thunk it? Yes, episode 34, special episode.
Yes.
Who's on our show today?
So today we're on location. We're in the studio with producer Jim Hill.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah.
34, my lucky number.
See? It's a lucky day.
One of them.
All right, well, let's get started.
Let's do it.
Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff,
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
a podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, a grooviar.
Let's get groovy.
Nice. Delay there.
All right, so today we're in the studio of music producer Jim Hill. We met Jim last month in San Francisco after the Rain Parade gig, and Jim was sharing quite a few stories that we really, really loved.
Yes.
So we've asked him to join us on the podcast to share some of those stories with our listeners, and he's been really generous to invite us into his working studio. So fans probably know Jim as Rain Parade's producer since Explosions in the Glass Palace, all the way through the recent contributions to the 3x4 album. But Jim has also produced other bands, including Wall of Voodoo, The Blasters, The Prime Movers, and quite a few others. And what we recently learned is that Jim has also worked in producing music for TV and film, with an IMDb page that's long enough to make your head spin. Jim has scored and mixed music for movies, for example, like King Kong, The Nun, Empire, Bates Motel, Fargo, Mad Men, movies, shows, and scores of many, many others.
I like what you did there.
Yeah.
I'll do
I have
anything.
that ability.
I'm an audio prostitute. So.
Today we want to welcome Jim to the podcast and learn how he got into this line of work and what motivates him. Jim, welcome to Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you on the show, Jim. But we wanted to start off, and what we can gather from looking at all the research that we did is that you started in the 70s, and we wanted to know, how did you get into a career in music from the get-go?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. See if I can remember. No, here's how it went. Just to give you some background, I started I became really interested in music when I was a young kid. And I think one of the things that sparked, obviously the British invasion was a big influence on kids that age, and me too. And I remember the first time I heard Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire, I was like, wow, that is really something.
Bound by wild desire, I fell into a ring of fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher. And it burns, 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 the ring of fire, the ring of fire.
And so I became interested in music, and at 11, I was in the 7th grade because I got pushed forward, and I started playing in the school orchestra, playing in the brass section. And I did that from, through junior high and high school. And then afterwards, I studied guitar, took lessons, and a little bit of piano and things like that. And then when I went to college, I started in college when I was 17, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was good at science and math, and so I just went to college. I was trying out all these different things, and when I got out of college, I traveled for 9 months through Europe and Asia, kind of like a gap year, like the English people take. And then I came back to Los Angeles. I guess I actually had my 20th birthday on that trip.
Wow.
And when I got back, I was on my own, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just happened to have a good contact he was a music business attorney, and I met him at a party that my mom gave because she worked in the film business. And he became interested in what I was trying to do, and he said, if you ever need any help, just give me a call. So I called him when I got back, and I said, I want to get a job in the music business, because I finally decided, that's what I wanted to do. And so he got me a job at a music warehouse that used to distribute records to stores and things like that. So I worked there for about a year, and all during my teens, and especially during that time, I became really intrigued by record production and engineering and things like that, the sound and just, the way songs were arranged and put together. And so I quit working at that job because I called him. I said, I decided I want to learn how to produce records and engineer records. Can you get me an interview at a studio? And he's like, okay, I'll see what I can do. 2 days later, he calls me up and said, I got you an interview at the studio. And so I went there the next day. And the next day after that, I was working there.
Whoa.
Wow.
It was just like, and it's really weird because I think I just made that commitment. It just kind of happened. That's what it felt like to me, because I finally decided this is what I want to do. And literally within a week, I was doing it. And I didn't know anything. Back then there were no recording schools or anything like that. And the way that you learned is you get a job there, and if they like you, they mentor you and teach you the whole process and all the technical things. And this studio just happened to be a really great learning ground. This place called Crystal Studios in Hollywood. And they had a lot of big acts coming through there. Stevie Wonder, Supertramp mixed Breakfast in America there. These one of the first studios in town that actually built a dedicated mixing room, just mixing only, which was at that time was very rare. And they actually built their own consoles, so I learned that end of it too. The sort of technical. They had a mastering room, so I learned about that. But I wanted to be in the big room recording things, and so after about a year, I learned all the stuff. They made me an assistant, and I worked there for 4 years, and that's how I started. And then the LA punk scene happened, and the owner of the studio used to let me bring bands in to just get more experience recording. And so I was bringing all these punk bands in at nighttime, and one of the bands, the drummer from Wall of Voodoo, Joe Nannini, was in the band. I think there's the band The Bags.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually mixed an early version of X's Los Angeles that was in the Danger House magazine at that studio. And that little flexi disc, which I don't have, is really valuable now, so I wish I had a copy of it. But anyway, so I was, got deeply ensconced into the punk scene, and I started working on that. And Joe Nannini from Wall of Voodoo, who I didn't know about, said, hey, I want to play you this tape. And there's another guy that I was working with. We were partners. We were trying to start an independent label. And so he was there too. He goes, and Joe was like, I want to play you the song that I'm doing with this band, Wall of Voodoo. So he has a cassette, and we turn it on, and it's their version of Ring of Fire.
Wow.
Oh.
Bound by wild desire, I fell into a ring of fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames got higher. And it burns, burns, burns. The ring of fire, the ring of fire, the ring of fire.
We were just like, oh my God, we got to work with this band. And so that's how I started working with them. So we produced that first EP that had all those great songs on it. And it just kind of started and went from there. Everything just kind of happened after that. So I don't know. It was just a great time during that
is
period.
full circle
Yeah.
from Johnny Cash to Wall
That's
of
why.
Voodoo.
That's why I
Yes.
brought that up, because it
That's
was just,
fantastic.
for me, it was full circle, and it was just, you know, I tell you, the feeling that we had when we heard that Wall of Voodoo version, we were just kind of like, it was just kind of like, wow, we got to do this. You know, that was kind of cemented our decision to start a record label. So we released the record ourselves.
And what was that record label?
It was called Index Records.
Okay.
And then because of that record, Wall of Voodoo got signed to IRS Records after that. So
Yeah.
So was it when you and your friend were starting Index that you did that early version of Los Angeles, Exodus?
no,
Los Angeles?
that was before that. I mean,
That was at Crystal.
Yeah, that was at Crystal. I was still working at Crystal when we started that label. So you know, I was just trying to bring in a bunch of bands. I did an EP with the band Holly and the Italians, and we wanted to put that out, but she didn't let us do it for some reason.
Okay.
And, anyway, so that's kind of how we started. So that happened for a while, but I just kept producing and working in the studio. So and because of that is how I ended up working with like the Blasters, Plimsolls, a lot of other LA bands, because of the response to that record. And I used to go see these guys. I was big fans of theirs. I used to go out to the clubs all because I was in my early 20s still. And so I ended up working with them, which was like, for me, it was just amazing. I thought, like, these guys are great. And I ended up working on the records with them and stuff. So it was really fun time.
Yeah.
So.
That had to have been great as a young
young
guy in your early 20s.
Yeah, it was fun, and part of the thing was too, at that point I became independent. I just went freelance after that, and I also used to go on the road with them and mix their sound on some of their big tours and stuff.
So live sound as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and the thing is, I had never done that before, so the first live gig that I did was with Wall of Voodoo, who had a very complicated setup, so they needed somebody like me to kind of produce the shows and put everything together. And we were playing at the Whiskey, and I was like, I'm going like, what is that noise? Like, just like, and the guy's like, that's feedback. I'm like turning stuff up. I was like, oh, I never heard that before. Oh, wow. So like the first show was a little bit rough, and then I got good at it quickly, and so we had a lot of fun going out on the road. It was a great experience, and that sort of doing those live shows, because when I worked with Wall of Voodoo, I was playing tapes which had sound effects during their songs. I'd like cue all these different. I was using cassettes, so I had them all queued up, and just bring them in at certain parts during the songs. And I was singing background vocals from the console.
Wow.
And doing all these delay cues on Stan's voice and all kinds of stuff like that. So people used to just sit there and watch what I was doing, and because I felt like I was in the studio mixing a record. That's how I approached it. And so being out on the road really and doing those shows, I mean, sometimes small clubs up to big, not huge arenas, but like 3,000 seat places, auditoriums and stuff like that. And it really informed my sort of approach to the studio of not being too precious or anything. Like, just I want things to be dynamic, and like that's how it is live, because it just happens and you got to react to it. So I still kind of try to imbue my mixing in the studio with those kind of ideas, or that ethos, just kind of being immediate and spontaneous with things.
Wow. I know that Steve Albini has the same kind of philosophy.
Yeah, and he's great. I mean, his records are really good, and he's very distinct in his approach, almost to a fault.
And you managed the board when Rain Parade played the 3x4 event at the Grammy. Were you also on
Well,
the sound there?
I kind of let the guy there do it, but I did a lot of advance work for that show, because none of the other bands had anybody dealing with the actual venue. And so it's a very complicated thing. So what I wanted to try to do is like have everything be streamlined. I mean, if that wasn't kind of planned out, it would have just been like, okay, wait for like 15 minutes while we go do this, that kind of thing. So I wanted it to be able to just like flow from one song to the other. And it was still like, there was still like a couple of rough spots, but I did mix Rain Parade's set, but I didn't mix the other ones. But I was next to the guy while he was doing it, so he tried doing this and that. But he did a great job. He was really good because he knew the system, and everything. So.
Well, I seem to recall one story Jim told us in San Francisco. He said, there was a note on the board that said, don't move the levels. And you said, I moved them all up. I just moved them all.
No, I don't listen to people's notes.
Well, I bring it up because Matt Pucci made a comment, and this is what really hooked Jeff and I to bring you on the podcast. And that was, he said, if you appreciate how we sound, because I think we were talking to him about, all these layers of sound, and it just sounded great. He said, it's not us, it's Jim Hill. And that's the guy you want to talk to. He said, he's the mixing god. He's the producing god. And you have to have him on.
And he went so far as to say that he will not do any projects without
you on.
That's where he's Matt and I have a great relationship. He's very sweet to say that. And he's told me multiple times that he considers me a band member, which is, awesome.
We've heard something very similar. Totally. And
he goes, no, you're in the band. It's like, okay, good.
And for podcast listeners who were at the Grammy event, they know Rain Parade just, their song just blew it out of the water. I mean, what did Matt call it? He called it the Rain Parade Orchestra because so many people on, but it was just a sound.
I think we had
rain. It was
like
beautiful.
6 guitars on stage or something.
It was everybody.
Yeah.
But I want to backtrack to Rain Parade. So, I think fans of Rain Parade absolutely know your name, and those who are maybe learning about Rain Parade definitely will know your impact on the band. So I want to...
They know me not as the sportscaster, but the producer.
And for those of you abroad, that's an LA sportscaster.
I use on my movie credits, I use James T. Hill now because it's a little more, I don't know, adult and distinct.
Do you prefer us to call you James?
No.
Okay.
Jim's fine.
All right. So you start working with Rain Parade on Explosions in the Glass Palace,
right?
Which is an incredible EP. Talk to us a little bit, and our fans especially, about how you joined forces with them. So we know about Wall of Voodoo. So how do we transition into other bands like Rain Parade?
Yeah, so that was during that time when I was working with a lot of local bands, and obviously a lot of bands come out to LA to try to progress their careers. And I was hired by Enigma Records. I didn't know the band, and Bill Hine from Enigma, who was he was the president of the record company, and he's very personal with his bands and the people he worked with. And I had known him for a while, and he called me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to produce this record?" I listened to Emergency Third Rail, and I was like, "Wow, they're great." So that's how I ended up doing that record.
Oh wow! I had no idea.
Me either.
That's
I
the
like
first
that.
that I've heard that. Yeah, that record's so good.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and the sound is great too.
It was funny about that record because back in those days, everything was done on a shoestring budget. So I was just trying to get whatever studio we could, and we cut all the tracks at one place, and then we cut Prisoners at this other place because I had a lot of relationships with different studios, so they would give me good deals and things like that. So we were just kind of like jumping around, and it's kind of good that way because the record doesn't have a sort of linear same sound throughout all the songs. All the songs kind of have a different quality to it.
It's very dynamic.
I really like that, actually.
And you're blowing my mind right now of telling me this backstory of, we're trying to string it together, a shoestring budget, but it's a very rich sound. I mean,
thank you.
Kudos to you.
You should have seen our budget on the Wall of Voodoo record. It was practically non-existent.
Was it worse?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was terrible.
For that Wall of Voodoo record, what was the turnaround time that you guys actually went in, got it done, and
It took a while, just because I think it was probably maybe a month and a half or something. Yeah, still pretty quick. There's a funny story about that because we were working at, I'm not going to say which studio, but we were working at this place and we wanted to go work somewhere else because we got a better deal or something. The place was great. That's where we recorded Ring of Fire and a bunch of the other songs. And so I went there one day to get our multi-track tapes, and the owner of the studio wouldn't let me have them because he hadn't been paid yet. And I was just like, and somebody bring him out to me, and he comes out and he's trying to take this tapes out of my hands.
Wow.
And I was like, no way, dude. I'm like, walked out of the studio with the tapes. And I don't know if he ever got paid or not. So.
Oh,
And you're not a small guy.
No,
so, yeah.
no.
I was a little...
If it came to a physical altercation, I'm thinking you'll win.
I just walk away at that point and let go of the tapes and say.
It didn't get to that point. It was just, he finally realized that there was no way that I was going to leave without those tapes. So he just kind of gave up.
But before we move on, I just wanted to add too. So when we were chatting with the band after Rain Parade after the gig in San Francisco, Jeff and I had brought some things to sign, and I had brought my original Emergency Third Rail.
Oh, really?
And Matt Pucci looks at it and he says, "Soraya, no, you have to get the remastered one. It's much, much better. It sounds better." He said, Jim's fingerprints are all on. No. He said, take this away. And I was sitting there going, well, this is my original copy. But it's really, I think for us as fans, to see that affinity between bands and the people who produce them and really help them sound the best that they can, it's really nice to hear.
That's actually interesting that you brought that up, because they were putting that stuff out and they didn't really have the right source material. I mean, the stuff for the first record, Emergency Rail, they just took off a CD and they were going to master it themselves. Matt called me and said, like, can you do something about this mastering? It's not going to sound good, I don't think. And I said, yeah, give me all the material and I'll do it. And I'm glad I did, because even the record company was like, oh yeah, this is like way better than what we had. So if you're doing a reissue project, you still have care that it's going to be presented as it should be, or in the best light possible.
So what source material did you have for that project?
Well, actually, they transferred the stuff from Explosions from the original tapes, from the original mixtapes. Wow. So they still had that. So those still sounded fresh. And the stuff from the first record was just, because it had already been mastered for CD, and it was off the CD, and that's back when digital kind of first started, so it didn't sound great. So, I had to do a little bit more work to get that to sound full and not so harsh and mid-rangey and stuff like that. So, yeah, I kind of forgot about that whole thing, because it was, so it's funny when you brought it up. I was like, oh yeah, that was like there's a little story to that too,
Well, and needless to say, I got back from San Francisco and ordered it and listened to it, and
way better, right? Yeah.
As we say in Spanish, ni de comparar. Yeah, no comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
So you started doing live sound with Rain Parade immediately as well?
I did all those records still when I was young, so it was really fun to go on the road, and like I did them while they were in town, whatever gigs they did in town, because that was easy and it didn't conflict with my schedule and stuff. But for some of the tours, I was able to work out the time where I could leave town and not, affect what my projects here were. So, and they weren't long tours, a lot of them. I did it with Prime Movers. They went to after I did produce that museum record, which we recorded in 24 hours straight.
Wow.
And we did a couple of overdubs, but we literally did the whole record. And at Crystal, I went back to Crystal, and we went in and we booked 24 hours straight and did the whole thing.
Wow.
And
so punk rock.
My mouth is on the floor.
So,
what?
It's like Days of Wine and Roses.
And so, not to go too far forward, but so I went on the road with them. They got signed to Island as as Rain Parade did. And well, I did a tour of the Prime Movers there. Did 10 dates in England, opening for Big Country, and that's when Big Country was at the height of their popularity, and it was awesome. You know, they were incredible. They were really nice to us, gave us everything we needed, and the most astounding thing about that tour was they were mostly playing in anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 seater auditoriums around England. And the reception for the Prime Movers was actually really good since they were an American band. And but when Big Country came on, everybody in the audience sang along with every song. It was like being at a soccer match or something, and it was really powerful to have like that sort of communion, that kind of thing happening. And it was really awesome, fun tour. Yeah, so.
That's crazy.
Oh my gosh.
So speaking of touring with Rain Parade, the Behind the Sunset album is a live album that the band did in Japan.
Tokyo.
And you were telling us an interesting story in San Francisco about that, where the ground was shaking a bit, perhaps?
Just a little.
Sometime during that tour?
I have two funny. I mean, we had a blast over there. We went there. We were there for 10 days, and we only did 2 gigs. We did a smaller club gig with Dream Syndicate, because Dream Syndicate came too, and the funny thing, it was just Dream Syndicate the band, Rain Parade the band, and me. So it was like, and when we got to the airport, Narita Airport, they had a separate bus for each of us, you know, like a big, huge tour. It was like 4 or 5 people get on the bus. Okay, let's go to town. So we did a club gig, and then we did a gig at a larger venue where they had a remote truck. And I also did Dream Syndicate sound at that gig too. And so, yeah, 2 funny things happened. We were staying at a really nice, they treated us great over there. It's all like nice hotels, 5-star hotels. They were taking us out to really great dinners, and they're really welcoming. So one night I'm taking a shower in my hotel, getting ready to go out, and everything over there. I mean, I'm 6'3", kind of a tall person, and like the shower spigot hit me. It was came up to my chest, right? So I had to bend way over to get my hair wet and stuff. And while I was in the shower, the whole building started shaking, and I was like, "Oh my God!" So I jump out, and I was roommating with Mark, the drummer at that time, and we were just kind of freaking out. But it was just funny. I'm in this little shower, and all of a sudden it's like, ah. And one really funny story was we went out a lot over there, obviously, because we were there for a long time and weren't that busy. And they were doing promotional gigs and interviews and all that kind of stuff. And so one night we went out. All of us went out to the Ginza district, which is the big shopping district in Tokyo. And Tokyo is super crowded. It was so funny. It's when I was on the subway, everybody came up to about where the showers came up to.
So
and
you're
it was
above
I was
height.
Yeah, I never saw anybody taller than me while I was there. And I remember I was on the subway, and it was packed, and all I saw was a sea of black heads, just looked like a vista of black hair, basically. But anyway, so we're walking around Ginza, and it was a Friday night, and the businessmen tend to get a little over-imbibed, after a long week of work. And so these guys are just walking around in their black suits, and they're just blotto, I'm not going to say shit-faced, but they weren't. So literally, you see two guys walking with another guy who's completely out of it, and they're just kind of dragging him, holding him up, and carrying on for their night. And there was a lot of traffic, and cars were all stopped, and there was this really drunk guy. He was trying to get into this cab, and the cab driver wouldn't let him in. And so he's banging on the car, and finally the traffic opened up, and the taxi started taking off, and the guy was banging on the car, and then the taxi takes off, and he tries to kick the cart, and his shoe flies off and lands on top of the car, and the guy drives away with his shoe, and that's standing there like.
That's
Tokyo is an amazing place. I mean, it's like full of people. Everybody's super polite there, and like it's amazing because they have that sort of moral code. There's hardly any crime there. There's no place you can't go and stuff like that. Or there probably is, but it's a totally different society than, say, New York or something like that.
That's hilarious. Then on Monday morning, he's in the CEO desk or CEO office of,
Yeah, exactly.
of Sony, right?
Yeah,
I don't know what happened, but I walked home on Friday with one shoe.
Yeah, somebody go get me a new pair of shoes.
Chop, chop. All right, so I'm just trying to picture the timing it took for the shoe to fly good on the roof.
It was just perfect. I mean, we just didn't watch it. It was just hilarious.
Another story we wanted to ask you about was about how the music for the Hellenes record came together. Can you walk us through some of the songs and how they came together? And also, We Love You, All the Animals.
Yeah. Well, that's I don't want to like go through all these stories, but that's a good one. But the Hellenes record, they recorded. I didn't record any of the stuff for that. They recorded it, and then they sent it to me to mix. I think it was back in like 2012. I had a loft space downtown. That's where I had my studio set up. And he sent me Water and Beautiful Flower, and he wanted me to mix them. So I did, and I think they released that as a single or something on some indie label. Yeah. And so they decided to put that on the I Love You, All the Animals record later on. And I wanted to remix Beautiful Flower because I felt it was just a little bit kind of dark sounding, and it's kind of peppy, so it needed to be brighter. But the Water mix, that song is amazing, and the Water mix, Matt was like, "You don't even need to do anything with that. That's perfect." So I was like, and I agreed with it because it has a real epic quality to it, and that's one thing that working in film has kind of taught me about mixing, is how to just get like real size out of your sound. And I can't say how I really do that because now I record a lot of orchestras, and I learned to do that in the past. Like I've been doing that for like 15 years, and I learned to do that, which is something I'll explain later. But that's another aspect of my production or my approach to the sound, from the same idea of working live and having that inform your process a little bit. The working with big orchestras and trying to get that huge size out of something is where I got that from. So I approached the Water mix with sort of a more kind of orchestral approach. And then fast forward a few years later, 5 years later maybe, they had recorded all the other Helene songs, and he sent them to me, so I mixed those too. And it turned out great. I really love that record. I mean, each song has a real special quality to it, and
no, it is a really, really good album.
I really consider that record to be like the best kind of unknown psychedelic record, like in the past 3 years or something. And of course, I don't know all the other unknown psychedelic records, but that's an awesome record. And
it's so good.
It's not on Spotify or anything like that, or on any streaming service. And so I guess it's really just for the true fans of the band. I mean, they're the only ones that kind of really know about it, but everybody, I still like get people come up to me is like, "Wow, dude, that Helene's record just sounds awesome." So yeah, I mean, they just sent it to me. I mixed it. That was my part, and I added some. Like on Water, I put a big low bass on it, like pedal bass, just to give it some girth. And Matt is great about it. He allows me to like do whatever I want with the mixes and stuff. So I do editing, and I have a lot of the performances were the timing was not together, so I had to do a lot of editing to tighten things up. And the song I Love You, All the Animals, which we'll now fast forward to that, there's two songs I want to talk about, that one and The Comet, which is a real special song. But I Love You All the Animals, I was like immediately like, Matt, we got to put some animal sounds on this. It seems really obvious or something, but I have a friend who has a huge sound library, and he gave me a bunch of tracks of animals, so I put those in just to give it that ambience. And I spent a lot of time like trying to find the right thing and the right feel for it, and because like there's some parts in there where the animals actually kind of sound pissed off, especially towards the end. There's this cow that just does the sound, and she's just, and so I was just trying to find like moments where those things really worked. Like in the second verse, they're like Matt singing really quietly, and there's some pigs in the background grunting, which is just like when I did it, I was like, oh my God, this is funny, but it's also kind of touching in a way too. So there's that, and the story about how that title and the title of that song and the album came about was from a show we did in Santa Cruz way back in the day, like when we were touring on Explosions. And after, I can't remember the name of the club in Santa Cruz, but it was the main venue where all the bands played. I'd seen like Oingo Boingo there, and I did a show with Wall of Voodoo there too. And so we went to a party afterwards, and I met this girl there who was really stuck out because, Santa Cruz is kind of like a party, hippie-ish kind of town. And she was like really classy, urbane, well-dressed, really attractive girl. And I was talking to her, and, of course, the guys from the band are coming up and like kidding me and stuff like that. And so we had to leave town that night, but I was talking to her, and I was single at the time, so there was no problems. And so, and I asked her for her phone number because things were going well, and then she went away for a bit, and she came back and handed me this card that said that she had written on it. I can't remember whether her phone number was on there. I may still have that card somewhere in a box, deep in a box. But she wrote on the back, "Je t'aime tous les animaux," and so Matt kind of speaks French. I studied French in college, and I have a terrible accent, but we're just like throughout the years, decades, it's always like, he'll just shout that out, and we'll just start laughing because of that memory, right? So. Wow. And that's why he ended up, and he was going like, what does that mean? Je t'aime tous les animaux. It goes like, je t'aime is I love you, and tous les is all the animals. So that's how that came about.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So. That story's so funny. Yeah. It's still good.
Yeah.
It's still good.
Yeah.
It's still juicy.
So The Comet is a special song for you too as well?
Well, yeah, because it's really an homage to Will Glenn. That song is what that's about. And I didn't know that originally, and then when Matt told me that, I was like, oh my God, that's like, because he was such a sweet person, and he passed away way too early, and he was kind of a classic nerdy kind of character, very quiet, very intelligent, and but really funny too. So I thought the title, The Comet, was a metaphor for something bright that just passes through time and goes away, right? And that's what I thought the metaphor for the song was. And that's why in the song I added those sort of sparkly, spacey effects that go from left to right, which I can play for you at some point. And that's kind of how I looked at that whole concept for that song. So when I mix something, I always try to have like some kind of strategy or concept for the mix of each song, so you just put some forethought into it so you have somewhere to go to. And then he told me later, no, remember that he had a Mercury Comet. That was the car. Like he had a little 65 Mercury Comet, and he loved that car. And I was like, oh, that's what the song's about, is his car. So.
Had you known that, there might be car sounds.
There you go.
Exactly, you're right.
No, I like
but
that
for
better.
but for some reason, I just thought, I'm still glad that I saw it that way, because I really that was my feeling about him, is like he was just this bright light that came and went type of thing. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
So is it possible to hear some of those isolated tracks?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
The animals?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to just have to take a moment while I set this up. But
Nous écoutons tous les animaux.
this is like the intro. There's some couple of really angry sheep there. And then the song starts here. I'm just going to play it with Matt's vocal here.
All the animals don't know what I do.
This is with, John's feedback guitar. We can pick it back up here. There's the pigs.
C'est pas ce que je ferais.
Here comes the Pink Floyd. Okay, so without going through the whole song, but
That acoustic guitar
Is-
sounds so...
It's dreamy.
Yeah.
there's this sound, which is really awesome, this big sort of power chord with like tons of echo on it. favorite part with the animals.
Mad cow.
The angry cow. I like that.
That sounds so
It
fabulous.
just sounds amazing.
That was, you can tell I put a bunch of effects on the animals to make them sound some distant, some up front, you know, that type of thing. So that was really fun doing that.
So that echoey guitar, that was something that you did in post. They didn't record it that way.
No, that was some effects that I put on it. Yeah, exactly.
It sounds incredible.
Yeah, it gives it a superb texture.
Yeah.
Like the texture of the song.
Yeah, I just added the. Some of it has to be really present, like the drums are really punchy, and then if you put other stuff in there that makes it sound more ethereal, that's kind of what I did with that guitar, and also made the animals gave it more of a space.
It's really
That's mixing. That's what we call mixing. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great adjective. It is cinematic. Yeah.
I was interested in soundtracks from a really young age, especially Ennio Morricone, because his scores are awesome. And a lot of those things, those sounds that he was using, he was trying to emulate animal sounds with instruments. So, like, there are specific soundtracks that even when I was a kid, I was like, wow, that's really amazing. And it's really interesting that I ended up doing that, too, because it was just... I don't know, just kind of one of those things that was kind of formative in my brain. I ended up doing it for some reason. I'm really lucky, I guess, you know, so.
So, Jim, do you have the tracks for Comet pulled up?
I do, yeah. And so, yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah, can we give that one a listen?
Yeah. What's really fun about revisiting this is messing around, like listening to different things and go like, wow, I could make a different kind of remix out of this, or something, you know, that kind of thing.
That's good.
If this was the 80s, we could be working on the 12-inch version.
No,
Right?
oh my
exactly.
gosh. Dance mix version.
Yeah, let's jump to the Comet. All right, so here comes the start of the song. Kids in there. What's all? Let me just isolate them. That's some synth effects that I added to it. You hear it panning from left to right. Kind of like a comet. So I chose to put kids in here because Will had a very childlike quality, you know, to him, and we had on Prisoners, which I wish I had that example. We used some kids at a playground as an ambient backing. Oh, hello, hello. Sounds almost like that Who song.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
So we start adding in the other tracks.
Have claimed the holy ground, certain when I think of you.
Here's the comet again. Sort of a rough remix there. It's like, kind of thing.
If that's a rough remix.
I
Wow.
I love hearing the breakdown and the isolated tracks and what all that adds to it.
Yeah.
The feeling that adds.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool layers, and when I mixed this song, the sound I wanted to get, especially on the drums and bass, I kind of wanted to get an old Beatles kind of Abbey Road kind of sound. So I used a lot of their plugins, their compression and stuff like that to get that kind of sound. That's what I meant by kind of conceptualizing each song, and so every one, like Better Place, which I think is an awesome song. My kind of conception of that was like, imagine this being like a Buzzcock song, that type of thing, like really aggressive and punchy. The one song that I had a lot of difficulty with, it was the first song, Chesterine, because there were so many layers on there. I was trying to mix it, and I was like, oh my God, I can't make any sense out of this. There's just so much stuff. And so I had a conversation with Matt, and it was like he had done through the intro and parts that were not the verse or chorus, he had structured this thing where there was 5 different things happening. So I had to heighten each one and take the other ones out and then build it that way. And then it made sense. But up until he told me that, I literally was like, Matt, I don't know what to do with this song. It's just a big mess. And so
doesn't that remind you?
He helped me sort that out. So
doesn't that remind you? It seems like Rain Parade always leaves a little trick for somebody trying to replicate the sound. It reminds me of the Steve Wynn anecdote about "You Are My Friend," where he said, "Yeah, it sounds simple, but it's not." Because
that was one where every line has a different chord. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And Steve, we had a conversation with Steve Wynn on the podcast, and he said, I was on tour in Italy, and I bet someone $1,000. I said, I would play "You Are My Friend" right now. Correctly.
I know how to play it.
Yeah, and the guy said, "Oh no, I can do it." And then Steve Wynn just said, "No." And he said when they were doing 3x4, he talked to Matt Pucci. He said, "Oh yeah, each one,
each line has a different chord."
Different chord. So, and I use that merely as a jumping off point. So, if you have some isolated tracks from the 3x4. For Rain Parade 3x4, we'd love to hear it. Okay, you're blowing our minds right now.
Okay, good.
The sound is beautiful.
Thank you.
So we know that the Bengals came in and they recorded background in this very studio that we sit in.
Yeah.
Can you isolate those tracks?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to do "When You Smile" first?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Doesn't it give you now a new appreciation for, first of all, the comet?
Yeah.
Now I hear it differently.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That's wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I want to listen to Chesterine again.
I want to listen to the whole album.
Well, I mean, the whole album is fantastic, but
I know what I'm listening to on the way back to Temecula in my 3-hour ride. I'm listening
can
to
you
the
imagine though? Poor Jim Hill's got to unravel this puzzle of Chesterine.
He's got to unravel Matt Pucci's brain. Is basically what he's doing.
But I love that he gives him free reign. Just do what you want.
That shows you how much respect.
And trust
for Jim as an artist. Yeah, absolutely.
But now I'm like, okay, Better Place as a Buzzcock song. Now I hear it.
Really?
Now I can imagine it. Okay.
I've got to go back and listen to it with that in mind.
We've got our homework now.
Mm-hmm.
We're rolling now.
When you smile, when you smile.
So that keyboard that you first heard, I added that just to warm up that section. And then
wow.
and then I put that ambient sort of sound on Matt, and then with the Bangles, I think those three elements by themselves.
Last night I was born.
Sorry about that. Those three elements on their own just sound really interesting. It sounds like an ambient record or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really cool. But yeah, let me bounce forward. Well, actually, here comes some backgrounds. I'm trying to find the Bangles stuff. That's the guys doing backgrounds in the verse. And here comes the girls.
Don't know what to do.
Oh, not yet. Sorry.
Lose myself in a minute or two. It seems like the end of the world when you smile. Never was a man who was more than bones in a sack. Doesn't take much to hold possibilities back. Don't know what to do. Lose myself in a minute or two. Seems like the end of the world when you smile. When you smile, I don't know what to do. Lose myself in a minute or two. Seems like the end of the world when you smile. Seems like the end of the world when you smile.
Whoa. Okay.
Whoa.
So I just wanted to talk about that idea about how you come out of that quiet verse. Each one of those verses, the soft part, which is actually the chorus of the song, each one kind of grows in complexity, and there's very subtle guitar layers that both Matt and Derek put on those. And I think the last one, which is double in length, or at least double, and it might even be longer, the guitar stuff that they did on that was just really beautiful. And then I wanted Matt's guitar, and we come back, you know, it's kind of that no easy way down, wow, 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 you know, that kind of thing he did on that.
Tremolo,
but it's a different chord, and no easy way down, I think it was a B chord, and this is A. But it's a very similar, distinct thing that he does. So the first two times he does it, everything just comes crashing in, like, wham, wham, just the whole band, like, full force. And so the third one, I didn't want it to crash in because I wanted to do something different, because I think everybody listening to the song expects that, okay, here it comes again. and so I took the approach of, like, Matt standing at the other end of a tunnel, walking towards you, playing guitar, and then it just like fades up and becomes more present, and then you hear that one, bow, when like John's guitar does that, and then it's full force again. That's what that whole idea was about.
Nice.
And I had to convince them to do that live. It's like, no, just leave me some space, so I can create that kind of effect, for his guitar in there, which I think I really like it. But and they do too. If they didn't like it, they would tell me. I'm not like autocratic or demanding about my mixes being the way they should. I let them listen to them, and they give me their ideas too, because it's a collaborative thing, so I want everybody to be happy with it.
And when it's been played live,
they try to recreate that with Derek Turner's guitar.
But let me tell you, it's a tough thing to recreate, but they did it.
And I did it on the fader too, just to try it. But the thing about the guitar is you can't slowly fade it up. Is all of a sudden it just kind of comes on, so you can't get the fade up effect, So I tried to help it when they do the shows where I take it all the way down and fade it up. But
nice.
Oh my gosh! It just, you appreciate that now more. Wow.
I love the visual of Matt coming down the tunnel,
and then just
guitar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Knock you out of your skin. Yeah.
I love it. That's such a great version.
Oh my gosh!
It's such a great version.
And to hear it just isolated, especially those backing vocals, and then.
Yeah, Vicky and Debbie sound great together. I mean, their voices are kind of similar, and probably because they're sisters, and so they just blend really well. I mean, the Bangles have that's one of the things that's really distinct about them is their background vocals. It's very almost iconic in a way. It's a real special sound that nobody else really has but them. I think that's one of the things that really sets them apart from a lot of other bands, female or male. It's just that sort of magic that they have with their vocals.
So Jim, they came in to lay down their tracks here in your studio. How long were they here at your studio recording?
They were here, probably 3 hours.
Okay.
And it was kind of a party. We got some food in here. I actually hired this girl to come and help me do the setup because there was just a lot going on and stuff. And everybody was here, and it was really fun. I mean, it was just like, hey, I got the Bangles in my studio today. It's awesome. Yes. And I tell people that and go, you kidding me, man? They are another band that I was big fans of when I was young, too, and everybody has their little boy crushes on them, too, so I may have had that myself. So it was nice to have them.
Okay, so we know you've produced an album in 24 hours, a month and a half. These 3 tracks by Rain Parade, how long did you guys sit and record? Was that long, short, or?
It was actually pretty fast. I mean, we had a deadline on that we had to get it done by, so I like deadlines otherwise because, I like to ruminate on it. I take my mixes home and listen to them, and, there's a whole process that I go through just to make sure that, they're coming across the way that I like them to. But how we did that is we recorded that up in San Francisco at this studio called Light Rail, which is in the Warehouse District. And I went up there in April and flew up there and spent a couple of days up there and did a rehearsal with the band. We actually rehearsed at the studio and recorded it just to get the vibe. I wanted to record it first of all so I could listen to it. I didn't want to go into a little rehearsal space and have a crappy recording. Mm-hmm. So they allowed us to use the studio, which was really generous. And so I went up there and we ran through the songs, made some arrangement changes, and I told them some ideas that I had about the songs, so we kind of worked all that stuff out. And then came back a month later, in May of last year, and spent, I think I was up there for 4 days, and we worked for 3 full days recording everything. And I wanted to record the whole band live together. I didn't want to, we did a lot of overdubbing just for layers, but the fundamental sound is them playing live. They're all in a room together. Some of the amps were isolated so we could get some separation and stuff, but everybody was in the room. Even Mark was playing keyboards. And at one time they have an organ with a Leslie on it, so we used that on one of the songs on When You Smile, actually. And So it's a nice big room. So we set up drums, bass, Matt and John on guitar, and Mark and Derek, and so everybody played all as one, and we just kept doing takes until it felt right, had the right tempo, and I did some editing between takes to kind of comp together the best version of it, but they're going, "Oh, was that good enough?" I'm going like, "No, I think you guys can do it better," kind of thing. So I was like, I was working them pretty hard.
Phil Spector over here.
Yeah, well, I wanted a different feel for each song. Like the drum sounds are different for each song. I didn't want the same sound, and so I worked with Stefan on that, and he was great, and I had to challenge him to play, and because he was tending to kind of overplay stuff a little bit, and I wanted to make his drumming like more simple, and especially on When You Smile, it's more tribal sounding. I wanted it to be not too busy and stuff, just so we could, when we added other stuff, there was not a lot of conflicting things going on. And then, I said, okay, at the end, I'll let you go. You can do whatever you want. He starts doing starts going wild and stuff. But, he had a lot of fun with that. And then he came down here and did, I did a lot of overdubbing with Derek after the Bangles did their vocals. And then the last thing that we did was added all the percussion layers to it, like the big shakers to make it sound even more tribal and stuff like that. And so the actual recording part went pretty quickly. I mean, the 80% of it was done in those 3 days.
Wow.
We did all Matt's solos there, overdubbed his solos, and then I did the rest down here. And then the mixing took a while because there was just a lot to figure out. But I basically did it maybe off and on in maybe like 3 weeks. But this is in between me working on my other projects and stuff too. So
Insane.
That is
Wow.
insane. So, Jim, when we first got into the studio today, we were listening to some isolation tracks for As Real As Real. Can we pull those up?
Sure. Yeah,
those
absolutely. And
show?
I want to play some of those, and also a little bit from Real World. I think we did some interesting things on that too. So yeah, the opening on this with the piano effect is something I created with the piano that Matt played during the song, and I just reversed it and put some effects on it. So this is just a drum track, but you hear guitars in there because they're all in the same room. That's why you're hearing that.
Fun, we live high, and you look towards the sun. Show me it's useless, you show me, and I
So you hear this keyboard effect. Some of this was Mark and some of this I did. Sort of same kind of sparkly sound as the Comet, actually. So yeah, some fun stuff there, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, you hear that sound that's similar to the Comet that I did, I thought, because it was the idea about referencing the sun again as sort of atmospheric. So I kind of put the same kind of idea in there with that sound, you know.
It sounds good. And when you isolate those tracks,
Yeah.
Steven's part
Oh
really,
my gosh.
really shines.
Yeah.
The bass?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
he's
bass
a
is
great
so good.
bass player. I mean, he's very fundamental as a bass player should be, but he's also really melodic in sort of a McCartney-ish kind of way. You know,
Absolutely.
like-
Yeah.
It was that pulsating was like boom, 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 like a heartbeat. I mean, it's wild when you hear it isolated.
Yeah.
You start hearing and seeing so many other things. Yeah. Ooh.
This is fun to do
Yeah.
this,
So-
play this for you guys.
So, you know, Jim, one of the things that I'm just gleaning here, just listening to you talk, depending on the music source, like your brain just kind of takes over. Your brain and, you know, your musical soul takes over. How, I mean, you've talked about your mom working in film and you were interested in film. How is the music career transition into music for film and TV?
Well, it was partly out of interest and partly out of necessity, and it's actually just something that just kind of happened. I've obviously been in this industry for a long time, and most of the work that I've gotten is through referral from other people, and especially in the film and TV stuff. When during the 90s, when the record business started tanking because of Napster and just things being way over budget, overspending, and that's a whole different subject. It really affected the recording industry, which I'm obviously in, and there became less and less work for doing records, basically, and I had been doing a lot of work at this one studio, and he had clients that did scores for TV shows coming in, and he referred me to one of them, and I'd never kind of worked in that field before, so I just kind of approached it like doing a record, and I recorded, I don't know, like a little 35-piece orchestra or something for one of these shows, and the guy really liked what I did. You know, he really liked the sound that I got, and I ended up working with him for years, and that's kind of how I got my start, was with him, and then it just kind of blossomed from there. And in 1996, I was offered to work with James Newton Howard, who's a big A-list composer. You know, he's done Hunger Games and a lot of, I mean, his IMDb is ridiculous. And yeah, it's a funny story how I came to work with him. This guy called me, he said, like, I'd just gotten home from working a long day, and he called me and said, hey, Jim, somebody needs an engineer to do a session tonight. Are you available? And I was like, well, I'm kind of burned out. I've just been working all day. I'm kind of tired. And he goes, it's for James Newton Howard. And I was like, where do I go?
Simple.
So, yeah, that was a no-brainer. And so I went and started working with him, and he ended up about I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 months later, he hired me to be on his staff. I was his right-hand man. And he was doing big-time movies, and that was a real step for me. That was a huge, like, jump for me. And so I ended up doing, like, I worked with him for 8 years on his staff, and that was pretty much all I did during those 8 years. I did some stuff on the side, but I didn't really have time to do too much. But that's kind of where I got my experience in working with on a large level like that, big 90, 100-piece orchestras and stuff like that. But I didn't do that. He had a guy doing this, Sean Murphy, who's like one of the best engineers in the world. I can absolutely say that, honestly. And I kind of learned how to do that from him. And he was always really generous with me. I'd ask him about techniques and and all this other stuff. And the most amazing thing to me was when you do those big dates, there is no time for sound. They don't do sound checks or anything. Like when you do like bands, so like you're working on the bass drum for like 2 hours, you know, getting the right sound and stuff like that.
Right.
There, just because of the expense and union regulations and stuff like that, you have, say you have a 100-piece orchestra at 10 o'clock, everybody's ready to play, and at 10:03 you're recording. Wow. There's no like, okay, can I hear the trombones or this? No, it's like, boom, you're on, you know. I was like, how do you do that? That's like amazing, you know. Wow. And it always like was like, oh, this sounds epic, you know. And when I started doing that, I had to learn how to do that. It's all in the setup, understanding the room, the kind of sound that you want. And so when I worked with James, that's sort of where I got my education and experience to work in that field. So I've been kind of doing it ever since.
So it's been a number of years that you've been working in that medium, right?
Well, yeah, I started in '96. I mean, you know, pretty much solely doing just that. I mean, of course, I've done records on the side, but that's, I mean, I make most of my money doing TV and film now. And so I worked with James up until 2005, and then I wanted to go freelance because I wanted to do my own thing or whatever. Yeah. And he was great. He was very generous, just a great guy to work on, extremely talented. And he hired me for several projects after that, and one of them was King Kong, which is just crazy, big, epic thing. How he got that job was Howard Shore is Peter Jackson's King Kong. He usually always worked with Howard Shore, composer, and Howard did all the Lord of the Rings and stuff. They had a falling out for some reason. I have my speculation, but I don't want to go there. But so they hired James, and it was late into the project, and you can't delay the schedule for things like that. You have to retain your schedule. So James had to write 3 hours of music in 5 weeks. Wow. Written, recorded, delivered in 5 weeks. So he's like, calls me, I was like, Jim, I need you to help me on this. And so we just like gathered all forces and literally worked at every stage in town, just getting all the stuff done. We were working 18, 19 hours a day, every day for 5 weeks. And it's really funny because you like look in the room, there's like somebody passed out on the floor or whatever because they're so tired. And we're all just like, but at the end of it, it was like really fun, you know, to go through that and get it done and deliver it. And it was a real challenge.
And you love a deadline.
And I love a deadline. Exactly.
Are you starting to see a pattern here? Okay, so first we have Ring of Fire. Then we have the mentorships, you know, mentorship at Crystal and mentorship with James and Nelson. And I mean, we're starting to see some patterns here.
Yes.
Wow.
So my question, Jim, to you is, you worked in music, creating albums and records. Now you're working in TV and film. Do you have a preference between the two?
You know, to be honest with you, I still prefer doing records because it's music for music's sake. You're not like against dialogue, but at the same time, I mean, working in movies is really awesome because your job is to create this feeling behind what's going on in the scene, and that's what music is supposed to do. It's supposed to enhance whatever emotion is in the scene, whether it's action or drama or whatever. And so it's a different approach, and I really enjoy it. I mean, you know, I love working in music of any form. I do prefer doing records though, because it's just music and nothing else. You know what I mean? So it gives you there's basically more creative opportunity there to engage the listener, I guess, or engage yourself into it, you know, that type of thing. So, because I always try to approach things as even though I'm working on it, I'm trying to retain some kind of objectivity as a listener also. One of my favorite, you know, like film and TV stuff, there's a few things that really stand out. When I first started working with James, we did, early on, we did Sixth Sense, that movie, the Night Shyamalan movie, which was really awesome. And then we ended up doing Signs and The Village and Unbreakable. So we're like doing all of his movies, and all that experience was really amazing to be involved with that. And another one that last year I did The Nun with Abel Korzeniowski, and that score is like really amazing, and he's an amazing composer. In fact, I'm going to be doing something with him coming up, another series, I think. And it's I don't want to kind of give it away, but it's supposed to be like really epic. But working with guys like that, I mean, they're just like, their knowledge is so deep, and you just get a lot out of it. There's a lot of challenge there, and there's a lot of reward. Most of these guys out here they're very creative and diligent, and they work really hard at it. So one of the other things I worked on was that show Mad Men. I did that I did every episode, 92 episodes of that over a course of 7 or 8 years. And that was all like, most of it was like 60s jazz. I mean, legit. We're trying to be like super legit, make it sound like that era, using old mics and the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, some big band stuff. And there was a lot of different styles, but it's, you know, we're trying to like make it feel like the 60s. Right. I mean, because that's the era that it took place in. And that was just really fun, because there's no opportunity for somebody like me to record jazz like that. And so I got to do that over that course of 7 years, and it was just awesome. I just feel really blessed to be able to get to be involved in stuff like that. So I actually feel like now I can work on any style of music, and I can pull it off because of all that experience. You know, even hip hop, I like doing that too, but I don't do it, but I like doing it. I mean, I work on Empire, and there's that show Empire, so there's some hip hop stuff in there, but it's, you know, it's like, to me, it's just like, if you have a reference for what the music is supposed to sound like, that's where you go with it, right? I mean, if I tried to mix a hip-hop song and I'd never heard one before, it probably wouldn't work, because I didn't have that reference point, right? And so yeah, I mean, it's just the variation of stuff that I've been able to work on is really fun. You know, it's just really enjoyable.
If you have any of your scoring that you'd like to share with us, I'd love to hear it. I don't know if anything is that you can share.
I can play it for you off of a streaming service, so because I don't have it in my system.
Yes, I could.
The one thing I wanted to mention is on "I Love You All the Animals."
Please.
The Animals were probably pissed because they weren't getting any royalties for the song. I forgot to tell you that.
That's hilarious. So speaking of jumping back a little bit, you mentioned that you wanted to play us a little bit of the real world.
Yeah, let's go back to that, and then I'll play you some score stuff. Okay, here comes Real World on the spot remix. So this sound is like Matt holding a chord on a piano and me strumming it with a guitar pick.
Oh, whoa.
Which is awesome. It sounds like a big auto harp or something,
Yeah.
you know. And it's the texture. This is like some sub bass I added, you know, like sub synth bass to make the chorus bigger.
Such a change of life. If I was insecure, was yesterday, but now I'm sure. So sure. This is the real world, and I believe our love is real. This is the real world, and I do want you for my girl. This is the real world, and I believe our love is real. The only thing I'm counting on. The only thing I'm counting on. The only thing I'm counting on.
I love that little inhale that
That
Matt
little
does
breath.
at the end.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Oh,
You're
sounds so
tripping
good.
me out here. Because now I'm hearing sounds that, obviously I'm in the ideal setup, but I'm hearing sounds that I haven't heard. Or maybe that I can't isolate. And like there was...
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult because it's like, all these things kind of add up into this texture, and sometimes things aren't really coming out, they're just kind of in there embedded. And so it's really fun to kind of go through this and just like, oh, let's hear this part really loud kind of thing.
Remix on the fly. I love
Exactly.
it. I love
But
it.
see, like, that's the thing is like, where did you come up with the idea to strum the piano chord?
Well, that was actually Matt's idea. He and it was funny when we were doing it. We did that up at Light Rail in San Francisco, and it was one of the first things we did. And Derek was like, I wanted to be the strummer. I wanted to do it. And I was like, but like, so how he did that is, he would just play a chord and hold it, right? Or no, he wouldn't play the chord. He would put his fingers down softly so the hammers would lift it off the strings, and then I would just go bing like that, and like it was really hard to do. So I had to like really put a lot of get a heavy pick and put a lot of force into it to get the zing sound. That's what I call the zing sound.
Because once you described it, then I could imagine it. But I was thinking.
And so what we did is we just did like samples of every chord at like slightly different levels and stuff like that, and then I just edited them in there, kind of thing. So.
Oh my gosh!
Sounds
It's a whole other song.
Yeah.
And it sounds so ethereal. It's dreamy.
I love this song. I mean, it's actually one of my favorite things I've ever produced.
That
really.
song in particular?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, that says a lot.
Yes.
That says a lot for a man who's had his hand in a lot of different tracks and albums.
Yeah. I just love the arc it takes. It's kind of like kind of a ballad, but it's kind of punchy, and then it gets like kind of rocking, and then the third verse quiets down, and then it gets big again, and the whole ending has a beautiful arc to it. And Matt likes to do a lot of things. On the turnaround, he'll cut 2 beats off because, if you notice, like some of the bars are like in 6, it's not a straight 4, and he'll just turn around and go to the next part.
That's Matt.
And when we did that song in rehearsal, they did it this way, and they, like I said at the end, just like as the song is going out, I want it to be softer and softer and softer. I wanted it to sort of diminuendo down to kind of nothing. And when I went back to do the recording, they were just like playing it hard. It's like, no, go back to how we did it. And so like part of that rehearsal was really effective, like to remember that. And so like, let's go back to that dynamic where it starts big and then just slowly till the end, it just diminuendos down to just Matt by himself singing the song,
Beautiful.
It's spectacular. Oof.
So you've worked on all these projects. You said this was one of your favorite. We'll wrap it up with one last question.
Yeah.
We want to know, out of all these projects that you've worked on, Jim, music and film, do you have one in particular that's your absolute favorite?
Oh my God, that's so difficult.
Or is it like a Sophie's Choice?
Yeah. Who's your favorite child? Yeah.
Well, I think my favorite stuff, it's really hard to pick out one thing. I mean, the Ring of Fire thing for Wall of Voodoo, where we ended up with that was, I was really pleased with that because it was a real sort of abstract take on that song, but it still had it still had that same quality that Johnny gives to a song, like depth and meaning and feeling and all that kind of stuff. And I have a funny story about him. We were in Scotland doing a tour with Wall of Voodoo, and Chaz, the keyboard player in Wall of Voodoo, knew Carlene Carter, so we were in Edinburgh at the same time, so we ended up having breakfast with her at the hotel where they were staying. Johnny and the whole Carter family were over there doing a Christmas special. And I'm such a huge fan of his. And on that tour, I had a camera I was sort of the unofficial photographer of the tour also. So, and I have a lot of awesome pictures from that. So I was like, I want to get a picture of your dad, and I didn't want to bother him, so I asked Carlene to just tell me when he's coming down, and she was like, yeah, I think he's going to come down. So I went out into the lobby, and here comes the man in black walking down the stairs.
What?
I was like, yeah, it was, and I was just like, oh, fuck, there he is. I mean, that's, this shit goes back to when I was 7 years old, like just being a huge fan of his. And a part of me just is like, I just can't take a picture of him. I was actually really nervous. It was a really funny feeling. And then as he's walking through the lobby, I pick my camera up, and he's looking at me, give me that Johnny look, and kind of pissed, just like, don't get into my world. And as he was exiting through the door, he looked at me, and I snapped a photo, and that photo is just epic. The lighting is beautiful, and the look on his face, and the whole thing. So
wow.
That I would have to say Ring of Fire has like you said, comes full circle, and then that happens. That's like one of the crazy.
Gosh, I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
You know, over the decades experience with that song, that kind of thing.
Wow. So he probably looked like what the cow sounded like on the
piss.
Yeah, he's more like a bull.
But I think lesson learned. Okay, so Ring of Fire, mentorship, but also nothing is happenstance with you, Jim. Nothing.
Well,
Nothing
yeah.
is just by coincidence. I'm learning.
It
very
seems so.
interesting sequence of
It's
events.
funny because I just never really think about it or thought about it, but now that I've been doing this so long, you start to see something that you never realized before, about the whole thing, and just looking overall, and the whole Ring of Fire thing. I thought about that, and just I realized it was something that was something that I was connected with. I mean, throughout like a long period of my life, in different instances and stuff like that. So, just because of my own personal history, that song really stands out for me. All the Rain Parade, I mean, Explosions was just a great record to work on for me, and there's a lot of stuff, but those two things. And I really love working with Matt. I mean, we're like really good friends, and I have the same depth of friendship with Stan Ridgway from Wall of Voodoo. I worked with him on a lot of other projects that I was extremely satisfied with and had a great time with him. And he's like one of my best friends that I've had for ever since the day we met, kind of thing. So he's awesome person. And film-wise, I think the Night Shyamalan, especially Sixth Sense, the Night Shyamalan stuff was really special. King Kong, just because of the nature of that project, and most recently The Nun. I really that score was a real challenge, and I'm really personally satisfied with it. So, and TV, I have to separate everything out. TV, probably Mad Men is the huge one for me, and Empire's cool too. We're going into season 6 of Empire, and Phil Eisler is a composer. He's an awesome guy, great composer, has a really good team, and we've really, between us all, we've really gotten somewhere on that show. And it's because music on TV is played so low, but regardless of that, they don't compromise. They work really hard, and so I've learned a lot from working with him and everybody that I work with. It's just like, to me, there's just more stuff you put in your toolbox of experience, that you can pull out anytime. So it's all kind of added up, and so I'm particularly pleased with the 3x4 stuff because it's I've been able to use all those various influences in helping make that record.
Sounds fabulous.
I mean, it's a great career.
Yes.
Still doing it, too.
Yeah, I was going to say.
No, I'm just saying,
Working
this is merely the beginning.
Yeah, I was going to say, when wrapping this up,
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, you're just in the prime of this right
Woo.
now. I mean,
Well,
you're
the good thing is, like, this is an industry. As long as your ears hold up, you can keep doing it. I mean, I know guys in their 70s are doing it because they love doing it, and so why stop? It's not.
Please don't.
No,
Thank
your
you.
passion is so tangible. Please don't stop.
Yes, yes.
Jeff, I don't know how we're going to end this, but
Yeah.
let's just thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank
Jim,
you so
My
much
pleasure. No,
for
absolutely.
all your time
My-
and for sharing these tracks. Man.
It's my virginal podcast, so I feel a bit worn out now, I guess.
And that's when we exit. Gente, agruiar.
Groove on, Paisley people, and thank you, Jim.
Bravo. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.